perspective. From Danzig to death, to Dark Throne to Dr. Shrinker. Buckle up, things are about to get heavy. This is the Metal Podcast. Let's rock and roll.
And welcome to another episode of the Metal Podcast, where we have our most exhilarating, exciting, and ambitious episode ever. I am your host, DJ, and I'm joined by my exquisite and most best friend, AC. How are you today?
You know, I'm a bit under the weather, but what we have today, I think...
That could be a sign, interesting. Yeah. Already some muddling here. A little foreshadowing here, but let's get ahead of ourselves.
Who knows? Maybe they're trying to silence us. So I would like to preface what we're about to do, because originally what we had planned to do, because most of our episodes, what we do is we find a few articles and then we chat about them and we think like, oh, this would be fun, or like, that's funny. Like let's this would be fun to rake over the coals, and we just riff off of each other. That's basically what we do. But for this episode, we actually did a lot of research. We were going to do this episode last week, but we decided we were not prepared. We had way too much to look into, and this is probably going to be a multi-part series. And what originally we were going to do was something that I thought was funny, was we were going to look into the conspiracy theories of why Jim Morrison actually never died and became Rush Limbaugh, and why Jimi Hendrix never died and became Morgan Freeman. And what most people don't understand about a lot of these conspiracy theories, and we'll get into that a little bit, is their frame of reference for a conspiracy theorist, because most people don't actually know conspiracy theorists. They just see how they're portrayed on movies and TV shows. So they'll say, have you ever noticed that Bill Clinton and Abraham Lincoln have never been in the same room at the same time? Think about it. And that's pretty much the regular person perspective is. Like they just think it's these random people that say crazy things, but there is actual evidence that goes into these claims. Not that I believe these two specific things, that Jim Morrison and Jimi Hendrix never died and became famous media personas. But with these conspiracies, there are actual... It's not so much that there is like smoking gun evidence for everything. A lot of it is circumstantial, but a lot of it isn't. Now, DJ, do you know where the term conspiracy theorist originated?
I don't, actually. I didn't think we were going here.
Yeah, well, it's important to start this off. So the term conspiracy theorist became popular in the 60s. Well, not so much popular. Well, it was basically created for people that questioned the narrative around the Kennedy assassination. And they called those people conspiracy theorists. So the term conspiracy theorist was created by the CIA. And that's going to be the major crux of what we are doing here. So
that's no joke.
No. And the reason that we trash this whole episode, because normally what we do, it's just fun stuff. Like we most of our episodes, if not all of them, they're done with a little bit of levity. Like we are having a fun time, and we're just trying to joke around. And while looking into this silly Jim Morrison thing, I found something much deeper, and that is just the origin of a lot of these bands. What a lot of people don't understand is most of these counterculture acts from the 60s all came from the same place. And on this show, the Metal Podcast, we don't talk about metal that often. I would say it's probably more than we think, because we seem to talk about rap the most.
Yeah.
But rap is the current culture of music.
Mhm.
Like this is what is going on as far as what the kids are listening to. But once upon a time, the culture was shifted by music, and that really started in the 60s in a place called the Laurel Canyon, which is an area in the Southern California, Los Angeles area. And that's where almost every 60s rock artist that you can think of, not all of them, but almost all of them, they originated in this area. And you hear a lot of these acts, and you would think maybe because like their style of music, oh, they're from like Arkansas or West Virginia, or maybe even like Montana or Canada. But almost all of them have they either started or were formed in Los Angeles, which seems weird. And you might think like, well, a lot of musical acts or entertainment acts starts in Los Angeles. Well, that's kind of the crux of it. Now, the first thing that I do want to start with is Jim Morrison. I remember like when we were in high school, and you probably, maybe you don't remember it until I say it now, but there were kids in our high school that used to wear that Jim Morrison in American Poet shirt. Do you remember that shirt?
Yeah, no, I do.
Yeah, there's one particular kid, I remember it. He was a year younger than us. He always wore that stupid shirt. And I've always really not liked this type of 60s music. Like there are stuff from the 60s that I do like, but this stuff, it never sat well with me. I never really liked this hippie stuff. Yeah. But that Jim Morrison, an American Poet thing, no person in no high schooler from our era of high school should be wearing that shirt. I understand that you had to be there. I understand that feeling for a lot of things. Like I've heard people say to me for my criticism of the Black Album, I've literally heard people say, well, I was there, man. Which I get it at the time, that's your thing. But the Doors lasted until I think 1973. Jim Morrison, did he die? He died in 71 or 73. Let me take a look. 71. So they weren't around for a long time. So this was in the the 2000s when someone would be wearing the shirt. Now I have some lyrics for This Is the End from an American Poet. I'm not going to read the whole song, but here, ride the snake. He's old and his skin is cold. The West is the best. The West is the best. Get here and we'll do the rest. The blue bus is calling us. The blue bus is calling us. Driver, where you taking us? The killer awoke before dawn, put his boots on. He took a face from the ancient gallery, and he walked on down the hall. He went into the room where his sister lived, and then he paid a visit to his brother, and then he walked on down the hall, and he came to a door, and he looked inside. Father, yes, son, I want to kill you. Mother, I want to F you. Come on, baby. Come on, baby, take a chance with us. Come on, baby, take a chance with us. Come on, baby, take a chance with us. Now, I didn't go through the Doors catalog and look for the worst lyrics for the worst song I could find. This is from This Is the End. This is a very famous Doors song. So it is my hypothesis, and not just my own. Many people believe this, that the Laurel Canyon musical act, or the musical scene rather, forgive me, under the weather, so not thinking so clearly, was entirely a CIA operation. And many people believe that it is this, that, or whatever. The various theories don't really matter to me. But my theory is that, like all music, it was intended to shape the culture. And this was a CIA operation to push hedonism and degeneracy. Now, a lot of people will believe that it was pushed to make the potential anti-war movement into something toothless. Because if you look at a lot of these musical acts, they were quote unquote anti-war musical acts. Now, this was something that you found in your findings, correct?
Yeah, I definitely did. Yeah, it's interesting too, going back to Jim Morrison. Apparently he had a very short time of actually writing all of the songs. It happened all at once. And apparently he was unable to play any instruments. He had no experience singing. He, I mean, he couldn't even play the songs. So it drives into question, where did these songs come from? And then it's interesting that the Doors were pretty short-lived.
Yeah, based on how people dog them up, you'd think that they had been around for like 20, 30 years. Like their first album out the gate was a huge smashing success.
Mm-hmm. And apparently when they played live, they were just terrible.
I've heard that too.
and with a lot of these Laurel Canyon bands, which we'll get into, Vito and his Freakers, if you ran into those.
I did not, but I'm excited to hear about that.
Yes, Vito and the Freakers, very interesting folks, which were essentially the first hippies.
Okay.
And they lived in Frank Zappa's home before it was his home, and he ended up taking over their troupe. But hey, I'm not going to get ahead of ourselves. We'll get into
We'll
Vito.
get to Frank, and we'll get to Frank Zappa as well.
Yeah, exactly.
But also with Jim Morrison and bringing up the anti-war aspect of all of these bands, a really common thread among most of them is that they were the children of not just military personnel, but high-ranking military personnel.
Yeah, and this is a time during, Vietnam. So, okay, AC, like everyone, got drafted. Everyone was in Vietnam. So wouldn't it make sense that everyone's father or mother or brother or whatever, uncle were in Vietnam, So
yeah, devil's advocate, sure, right? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
A lot of people. And also it was a different time in our history where it was kind of expected that people from this era, you just do military service because, it's the thing that a citizen does. So there was just more servicemen. But go on with your point.
Well, it's interesting with the hippies. You have this ragtag band of unwashed, drug-fueled, long hair, sporting flowers and peace symbols. It's a lot easier to marginalize than, say, a bunch of respected college professors and their concerned students. So essentially the anti-war movement was already underway before the first aspiring hippie even arrived at Laurel Canyon. Some theorize that the hippies were the end result of a plot by the CIA to neutralize the anti-war movement, with LSD turning protesters into self-absorbed navel gazers.
Now, I've heard that too, and I push back on that theory.
Okay.
Because I don't think that the anti-war movement was going to grow from the hippies, but I do believe that if you want to delegitimize a movement, you make it unlikable. Like from our time, the closest thing that we had to something like this, as far as like an anti-something, was Occupy Wall Street. Now, these were people that had a genuine complaint, and rightfully so. There were bankers that were using our money as though it were their money, and when they lost it all, they got a bailout, and we got stiffed with the bill. And then when they showed the people there, like you had people talking about Native American rain dancers' rights. Did you ever see that clip, the Stephen Colbert interviewing the person? It was a girl's like, I am a female-bodied person. My name is Ketchup. and she was with, yeah. And
I don't think I saw this.
Oh
my goodness.
Now, Stephen Colbert is a, pretty annoying, detestable human. But in this interview, he is actually very funny because he's dealing with a crazy person. And it was a different time. It was a time where you would see these crazy people and it was okay to point and laugh. Where now these crazy people, these are the unsung heroes of this generation. But it was a pretty concise moment. Like, this is when Occupy Wall Street lost all legitimacy. So if you have a bunch of women with unshaved armpits, and you have a bunch of men with terrible beards and bad clothing, just doing drugs and just trying to have as much copulation as possible. Now, if you're a normal person with a little bit of war fatigue and you see that and you're just like, oh, geez, maybe I should enlist. I don't know. So I do believe that, but I don't think that the hippie movement was there to defang the anti-war movement. I think it was there to destroy a generation, to turn these people from being like the respectable nuclear family into these hedonists that just kind of wander around the world and try to find their place, man. Like, the best economy in the history of the country turning into what we have now. It all led to this moment.
It's all related.
Yeah, and we lost the culture in the 60s, and that was described as the counterculture movement. And what were they countering? Well, because, it's the rebel against the status quo. What was the status quo? Get a job, get a family. Well, for men, get a wife, have a family. For women, find a husband, have a family with them. So it turned quickly from the nuclear family to now you have a man and a woman working. So that's less children. And now, because a man and a woman both have jobs, so now the cost of housing has doubled because the market dictates what people can afford. So now it's no longer single income household. Well, now you have two people. Well, rent just doubled. Well, you can afford it. You got two people. So the culture was destroyed in the 60s. Now, I want to go back to Jim Morrison's father.
Yes.
And contrary to what many people believe, and this is why I push back on this was made to quell the anti-war movement. World War II was an extremely unpopular war. Now, based on how it's treated in this day and age, you'd think people were extremely gung-ho about it, and they couldn't wait to go overseas and fight the enemy. But the reality was, people were really anti-war because they were coming off of World War I, which was extremely devastating to the country. It was really bad for the morale of the people and just the damage that people came back with. It was extremely unpopular. Now, after World War II was another war, which was Korea. And then now we're on Vietnam. So it's not like people were happy with war and we need to stop the anti-war movement. People don't want another war. Generally, most people are anti-war. Very rarely do people want to go fight wars. Now, if you watch Hollywood movies, you might think that, oh, look how much everybody is happy about war. Or maybe you see like senators in the vein of a John McCain that were just, we need to go bomb these people. It's like, well, these aren't actual people that experience any combat. These are people that want to send your children to fight. And most people understand that. Like, I don't want my son to fight in some pointless war. So George Stephen Morrison, he was a rear admiral. Now did you know about this, DJ? That he was the admiral during the Gulf of Tonkin incident, like he was on the ship where it happened? Did you know that?
Before this, no, I knew that, Jim Morrison's father was like an admiral in the Navy and was somehow connected to the Tonkin incident. I didn't know he was the guy that literally fabricated it, essentially.
Yes. Yeah. And what most people don't know is most people don't know anything about Vietnam other than just they know the memes of the oh, you baby killer and the deer hunter born on the 4th of July, Full Metal Jacket, what's another Platoon, like that's what people know. They know the movies, the Green Berets. They don't know how Vietnam started. Now, it started over an incident called the Gulf of Tonkin. Now, the Vietnam War didn't just start. It wasn't like America's like, let's go fight some Vietnamese people. And then if you ask some people that seem like they have some rudimentary knowledge on the subject, they'll tell you, well, it was to stop the spread of communism via the domino effect. But the Gulf of Tonkin was the incident that kicked off the entire Vietnam War. Now, in very recent times, and I don't mean, in the last year or so, in the last 10, 20 years, the evidence has come out that this was a false flag staged by the United States /CIA. And a false flag is a fake incident meant to blame another enemy to justify any kind of aggression or conflict, for, in layman's terms. Mm-hmm. Jim Morrison's father was the guy. He was the guy who led that false flag. One of the most iconic singers in American history. His father may have been the guy who started the Vietnam War. Now, here's another thing, because now DJ and I, we went off in separate directions. Like we started from, a few jumping off points, and then we branched off in different areas. And that's how we came to this. So I don't know what he knows or not. Now, did you know that Jim Morrison used to do Army recruitment commercials?
I didn't know that.
Yes. So Jim Morrison, people like to paint Jim Morrison and Frank Zappa both as these kind of, their dad, they were in the military, but he really hated his dad. Oh, yeah. He was this anti-war revolutionary. Well, Jim Morrison was doing Army recruitment ads. And you could say, well, you know what? Maybe he decided to be his own man. Well, he couldn't do anything as far as music. Like, as you said, he couldn't play any instruments. He could barely even sing.
He couldn't write music.
He couldn't write. Yeah, he couldn't write.
So did he hum it in his head? He just hummed it for the people in the doors. All right, thank you guys.
Write this. Go. Okay, yeah, make a song out of that.
All right, let's light my fire. All right, next.
yeah. So and that's how the Doors started. No. Through his father's connections, he almost certainly had access to a media conglomerate that allowed him, a former Army recruiter, essentially. He was rewarded by getting to be not just a rock star, but one of the defining rock stars of a generation. Now, gosh, I gotta dig through my notes here, but there was a special effects studio in Laurel Canyon. Got to find where I put that. I don't remember.
It's on Lookout Mountain, right? You're talking about
Lookout Mountain. Yes. So if you want to take the lead on that one, I forgot where I put that, but go ahead.
Well, essentially, Zappa lived on the log cabin, which was at the heart of Laurel Canyon, at the crossroads of Laurel Canyon Boulevard and Lookout Mountain, and that's where literally like every musician who passed through Laurel Canyon in the mid to late 60s would go through there. And not to get ahead of ourselves, but our friend Alice Cooper, as a matter of fact, was signed to Zappa's label. But this Lookout Mountain
Air Force Station. So yeah, it wasn't.
Yeah.
So it was specifically a military thing.
Okay, I got notes on it.
Yeah. So because it wasn't just like it's a lookout station and maybe it's like an orrery or something. No, it was specifically a military base. Yeah, but it was military led. Now this is a term that we don't really hear too much. I used to hear about it all the time, like 10, 15, 20 years ago. I can't tell you the last time I heard this term, military industrial complex.
No, yeah, and you hear this a lot when you research this movement and these Laurel Canyon musicians. Like, what the heck?
Yeah, so a lot of these people they lived around this military base. They're the children of military figures, and they all form a band. And within the year that they form, they not only have a record, like in addition to a label, they are a smash hit, massive airplay, millions of albums sold, worldwide status. And they reshaped the culture, because you go from the 50s, like, Leave It to Beaver, to the 60s, long hair, drugs, sex, rock and roll. Now, now I want to do a little thought experiment. Not really a thought experiment, more just kind of like word association. So I'm going to ask you something.
Oh no, I'm bad at questions. No. I'm ready for it.
This one's okay. You can do this one. This one will be easy.
I can do this one.
Yeah. I believe in you. And this goes for the audience as well. I think you can do this one. You've had time to prep on it.
All right.
So just take a moment, because I do want the audience to think about this too. Okay. So I'm going to ask you something, and you tell me what comes to mind. And I'm going to say, now go, and that'll be your cue to say it. Go. Yeah. Okay. Hippie. Now go.
Smelly.
Okay, that's fine. I'm glad that it was something. See, I knew you could do it.
I had time to think.
Yeah. It's smelly. It was something. Yeah. You didn't freeze. Well done. I knew you could do it. But to me, hippie, I think of peace and love. Not literally, but that was their slogan, peace and love. Now, what do you think the peace and love means? Because there is an answer. Okay. Well, clearly you don't know, but that's okay. I won't fault you for it. Because it's deeper than what it seems like. Because you could say, well, it's at the height of the anti-war movement. So peace, meaning, no fight, and love. We just want to love each other. But the reality was, the hippie movement was nothing but degeneracy. They didn't want to stop the war. They didn't really care. It was all about, it's the same group that's doing like Black Lives Matter or what other stuff, climate change, or like legalize whatever, this and that. It's people that they get dopamine hits from other people saying, you do it. Yeah, you're fighting the power. So their whole thing is, it's all about dopamine hits. So the peace that comes from the tranquility, or granted the sedation of the drugs that they're on, either whether it's the minor marijuana or it's more likely the LSD.
And it's funny with a lot of these characters.
Go ahead. You can comment on the LSD.
The LSD. Well, a lot of these guys would refrain from taking it, like Zappa, or Manson, and they'd have control over their people, so not to. That's fine. Yeah, but the love aspect wasn't actual love; it was lust, because they didn't want to find someone, pair up, love, make family.
No, because they're like, oh, we're all one big family. No, it's all one big orgy. So you can't love multiple people that aren't like in a romantic way. Like, you can love your spouse and your children and,
it's that
your
pleasure
actual
thing we've talked about.
Exactly. It's all about pleasure. So the peace and love is a perversion of those actual words. It's sedation and lust is what they're actually after. They didn't want to end the war. They didn't even care. They were just flying high. So the hippie movement was created by the children of military figures. Now, I just want to throw a few other things out there. So do you know the band America?
Do they do We're an American Band?
No.
They're not them? Okay, then I don't know them.
No, they do the I've been riding down on the horse with no name. Just came in from the rain. You know that song?
I don't think so.
No, okay, Horse with No Name. It was a big song. It's featured in an episode of Breaking Bad.
Oh.
And the guy who wrote it was a guy named Lee Merton Bunnell. And he was born to an American serviceman stationed in the United States Air Force Base, RAF South Ruislip. So that was another military person. Jackson Brown, do you know Jackson Brown?
Yeah, I know Jackson Brown.
Okay, yes. So he was born in Germany, where his father, an American serviceman, was stationed for his job assignment with Stars and Stripes newspaper. He was part of the European Reconstruction after World War II.
I have the Lookout Mountain stuff in front of me if you want to go back to that about what it was.
Well, sure, we can go back to that, but just I mean, these were just a few examples to basically say the hippie movement was created by the children of military servicemen, and it turned America from nice, conservative, hard-working, happy, prosperous, like nuclear families, into these degenerate liberals with no direction and no purpose other than seeking out pleasure. And for all those people that like to say, like, well, people are happier because they're able to be themselves. People are not happier now. And people are not able to be themselves. In fact, people are now what they're not. People are trying to be something other than what they are. And what they're supposed to be are monogamous, normal workers with happy families and in real life communities and social circles. And the hippie movement destroyed that. And you could say, well, a lot of those people did have communities, but we're experiencing the fallout of that. That was what destroyed American society. Now we can go back to Lookout Mountain. Because now that we've set up that premise, now Lookout Mountain was essentially a special effects studio that was like Hollywood special effects were developed in this military base, which is very interesting. But go ahead with what you have.
So it was built in 1941 and it was originally envisioned as a fortified air defense center. It was hidden from view and surrounded by an electrified fence. And in 1947, it became a fully featured and fully operational movie studio. It had 100,000 square foot, 100 square feet of floor space. The covert studio included sound stages, screening rooms, film processing labs, editing facilities, animation department, and 17 climate-controlled film vaults. It also had a helicopter pad and a bomb shelter. Over its lifetime, the studio produced some 19,000 classified motion pictures, more than all of Hollywood studios combined. So apparently Laurel Canyon is also the movie picture capital of the world. And there's also indications that Lookout Mountain Laboratory had an advanced research and development department that was on the cutting edge of new film technologies. So it says that some Hollywood luminaries that were there, like John Ford, Jimmy Stewart, Howard Hawks, Ronald Reagan, Bing Crosby, Walt Disney, Hedda Hopper, and Marilyn Monroe, were given clearance to work at the facility on undisclosed projects. I mean, honestly, we could do a whole show on just this place. We could just reform our podcast into talking about the hippie movement. I mean, there's so freaking much.
Well, it's all connected.
It's all connected.
It's all connected, and we'll get into that later and how it does circle into modern times, because it does. Okay. It really does. It does. No, you'll all see. Like, I don't know if I'm going to blow your mind, but these are definitely things that you have never thought about because of how American history has been framed. It has been framed through the lens of fiction. Because most people's understanding of history really does come from movies and TV shows. And a lot of these musicians, they're the sons of military figures, and they made it big in essentially Hollywood studios.
Well, I'll even go a bit further, because when you go through the roster of these Laurel Canyon superstars, what you find more often than not is not only that they're sons and daughters of the military intelligence complex, but they're also industrial. They're also many times the sons and daughters of extreme wealth and privilege, and oftentimes they're both rolled into one convenient package. So we'll get there.
Well, I will. I'll throw this out. So allegedly, David Crosby
that's who I was thinking of.
Is related to Alexander Hamilton.
Well, he's related to a few more influential people than just that, but yeah.
More influential than Alexander Hamilton? Alexander Hamilton is the architect of the Federal Reserve. Now, for those of you who don't know, Federal
just
Reserve,
one guy.
Yeah, the Federal Reserve is a private entity responsible for how all of our money is created and used. And Alexander Hamilton was the guy who created that. Now and I'll say this about Alexander Hamilton. Now, most people know Alexander Hamilton now as that guy from that hip and cool hip-hop musical. Yeah, Hamilton. Now, why is it that Alexander Hamilton didn't get the treatment that the other founding fathers get? These days, every founding father of America is demonized and treated as this evil monster. But not Alexander Hamilton, but Alexander Hamilton is the one that basically said we should not be on a gold standard, but we should have one private entity basically own our country and have the country indebted to that. Now, he is the only one that is heralded, especially by the left. Mm-hmm. And he gets his own musical written by Lin-Manuel Miranda, who is writing all the songs for all the new Disney movies. And he and David Crosby may be a descendant of Alexander Hamilton. Now, what a lot of people don't understand is, now this is probably something you've heard before. I don't know how much thought you put into it. All men are created equal. What does that mean to you?
It's your God-given right that no one's better than anyone else.
Based on what?
Your rights from God.
Well, no, it does mean a very specific thing. Now, what people think of when all men are created equal, well, that just means we're all the same no matter what. No. DJ is taller than me, so he has advantages over me for that. Therefore, we're not equal in that sense.
Okay, I get that.
But what it does mean is now DJ, he's the son of a senator, and I am the son of a cobbler. Our birth doesn't mean that he's better than me in that sense. It's specifically on a class base, that's what all men are created equal means. When America was founded, it was basically saying we're not going to have this monarchy thing. We're not going to have this royalty thing where if you're born into this family, you're just better than other people. Granted, that has been perverted, and that is essentially thrown out the window at this point, as you can see with your own eyes currently in this day and age. But if there were still an American aristocracy, David Crosby 100% would be part of that. And we will get to him later.
Okay, we can get to him later. Yeah, he would be like a duke or a prince or something like that.
Yeah.
If there is, like, as many believe, like a network of elite families that has shaped national and world events for a long time, then it's probably safe to say that David Crosby is a bloodline of that clan.
And David Crosby was still shaping that group, that
movement. Yeah, and he was a little older than the rest of them.
And also, a lot of those people, so Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, I believe Neil Young was Canadian.
He was. Yeah, and he has an interesting meetup story with Stephen Stills, which is very interesting. Did like a cross-country trip, hoping he would find someone in the city.
But again, they all met up in Los Angeles. Around the Laurel Canyon, and
they heeded the Pied Piper.
And their first album went number 1 in the chart.
Well, before that, you had the Byrds were the first band, or the first band to release an album. But yeah, we'll get into that.
You want to wrap up on Lookout Mountain?
We can wrap that up.
Yeah, because the main thing with Lookout Mountain was it was a special effects studio ran by the military. And I would make the argument that the hippie movement, as far as the leaders, the musicians involved, they were a special effect. Because I remain steadfast in my assertion that popular music is all AstroTurf.
Yes.
I think some of it, every now and then, it's been a long time, but I think there were times when the music, it felt fresh and new, and people gravitated towards it. And it probably was a result of just times changing. And I think the times changed because people forced it to. And you see a lot of people pining for the 50s now, because that was when people really were happy. Do you know who William S. Burroughs is?
That sounds familiar.
He was the author that wrote the book Naked Lunch. And he shot his wife in the face.
Oh, jeez.
Now, this was a guy, he was a homosexual heroin addict. And Naked Lunch is basically about him going on a drug trip and having sex with anonymous men. Now that's wonderful. Yeah, so the book isn't explicitly about that, but it is based on the author doing that.
Okay.
And he was heralded as a counterculture icon, because the reality was, in the 50s, everyone was miserable because no one was allowed to be who they really were. But the reality was, everyone was allowed to be who they were, but people weren't allowed to be who they weren't. And that's where the change came in. And that's where these bands came in and basically told everyone to abandon your responsibilities and give in to hedonism. And you had the backing of the media telling people this, because these bands, if you want, you don't have to play this music on the radio. There are plenty of other acts you could play. You could play, the Ballad of the Green Berets, or you could still be playing Davy Crockett. You can play all sorts of cheesy fun stuff. Lollipop, lollipop, oh, lolly, lolly, lolly. There was plenty of stuff that the kids were into, and then all of a sudden you have these people, and they're writing songs that are just as cheesy, but they themselves are spreading the message. This was the first time that the artist superseded the art. So you have these people basically saying, this is what we want you to think. And it's not that their songs reflected that. Like, you could say, the Doors have The Unknown Soldier. That's an anti-war song, I guess. But is Break On Through to the Other Side or Light My Fire, like, are these anti-war songs? Riders on the Storm, is that an anti-war song?
And did they ever just come out and condemn the war? I think Jim Morrison would often say his parents were dead, and it's like, oh well, he just hated his father. Well,
abracadabra.
If you don't want to talk about your dad or someone you don't like, you just say they're dead. Then no one asks questions. Yeah, you don't want to talk about the guy who started the Vietnam War.
Yeah, and also gave you your career. Because here's the thing: back then there was no Wikipedia. Like, oh, let me look up Jim Morrison's. No, it says right here. I looked up on my iPhone X. It says that Jim Morrison's dad's still alive. Jim Morrison, you're lying. No, back then, you take their word for it, and you look up to these people. You see this person who does the song that you like, that everyone says is so cool. Well, I want to think like that person. This is the warlord. This is their warlord. This was a big thing, and we had not really seen anything like this before. This genuinely was a cultural phenomenon. It's why, like, the boomers look so fondly on Woodstock, because it was a thing where they all were there. Granted, they were all there doing drugs and having, anonymous sex. I'm gonna quote one of your favorite movies. Well, definitely your favorite movie series. What movie am I about to quote?
Probably Austin Powers.
It's Austin Powers. It's from the first one when Ms. Kensington says to him, well, Austin, times have changed. And he says, well, as long as people are having anonymous sex with various partners while experimenting with various mind-altering drugs, I'll be sound as a pound. Like that's basically, was the time.
Matters.
Yeah, that was what they were doing. And they were all together doing it. So like someone gets drunk alone, like that's sad. Mm-hmm. But like you're at a bar with all your friends, like cheers, like sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name. Like, oh, that's just a good time. Like it does, you'll yes, that's a line from the show. You did it.
I know stuff. I did.
You do. Well done. But they convinced an entire generation that this was the thing to do. Like we went from reefer madness, which is silly in its own right, but they went from having reefer madness to just an entire generation just doing acid and having anonymous sex. And this is probably where, I guess, what we could call slut culture was born.
Ooh,
I heard
everyone.
Yeah, I heard a girl say recently, she was talking about a coworker. She said she's in her slut phase. Now, she wasn't saying this to chastise her. Yeah, she wasn't saying this to chastise her. Like that's just a normal thing. Like, remember, like, slut used to be a brutal slur.
Yeah, it's like, oh, every girl's got to experience those slutty college years, It's like that from that Bridesmaids movie. I remember that quote.
I haven't seen that movie.
You haven't?
I've seen parts of it. I saw one thing, like...
Well, there is a Wilson Phillips song in that movie.
Oh, boy.
Oh, wait, little foreshadowing
we'll get to the...
We'll get to that.
We will get to the mamas and the papas is another thing. There's just...
I'll be the mama, you be the papa.
Yeah, there's a lot.
There's a lot. There's a lot with David Crosby. There's a lot with Graham Parsons. There's a lot with all these people. There's a lot with Houdini's involved with this.
Yeah.
Did you get with the Houdini stuff?
I did not.
Yeah.
Now, when you say Houdini, do you mean Harry Houdini, or do you mean the short-lived rapper from the 80s?
No. Harry Houdini.
Okay.
Born in Hungary to a rabbi father, apparently, or something.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
apparently he was a super spy, and he would be assassinating people instead of doing magic. But anyways, that's neither here
abracadabra! I will make this political adversary disappear. But to wrap up on this point is that they genuinely turned a normal society into a broken society, because shortly after this we have the rise in homelessness, and most homeless people are drug addicts, or they're crazy,
or hippies.
Well, I would say hippies are drug addicts and crazy as a result of the drugs they were addicted to. And then we now have a lot of single mothers, which leads to a rise in crime. And it all came from essentially the CIA and the military-industrial complex taking a few of their children and using media connections to create a huge cistern in society where it just split normalcy open. Now, from what I heard, is there was genuinely an anti-war movement in the 60s, and it was normal-looking people. And they did have hippies come in, and it did make people not want to be involved in any anti-war movement. So you had something that was already like a natural thing, because people naturally don't want to fight wars, especially almost every war that's been fought has been fought under false pretenses. Like I'm sure there's been some exceptions, but for the most part, do you know what World War I was fought over?
Wasn't it like Franz Ferdinand or the sinking of the Lusitania? Or is that what technically, apparently,
the sinking of the Lusitania is what got the United States involved. But that's also, do you know the story of the Lusitania sinking?
Not really.
Okay, so that was something that I believe it was the Germans. They said, don't send this ship over because you're bringing arms into this conflict, and you're not allowed to bring weapons in. And they sank the ship, but oh no, it was full of civilians. So the Germans sank this civilian ship. So the United States has to jump in because Germany committed an act of war. Turns out the ship was actually full of ammunition and weapons. And they lied about it being a civilian freighter to illegally jump into World War I. But yes, so it was started over the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. But is that what made the whole world go into war? I don't even know what World War I was fought over, but I do know that the leaders of all the European countries that were in conflict were all blood relatives. All of them.
It's the same people.
It is
the same people everywhere. They're everywhere.
Yeah, it really is, and
it's the same people.
The same. It really is. Like, I'm sorry if you don't want to hear this, but this is the truth. The world is ran by people, and it's not like nobody is in control. No, there is a group of people that are in charge. The same names keep coming up. The same families keep shaking each other's hands. They keep working together, and the children of their generals, and usually literal generals, are the ones that are in control of the culture. That's what you have. You have these people that are in power deciding how the world is ran, and then their underlings are making sure their houses are cleaned, And the children of them are the ones that are making your music. They're the ones that are producing your TV shows. That's how it works. It's not like, if you want to work hard and you want to be a record executive one day, you won't. You won't. Maybe you have a real good ear for spotting talent. They'll just use their media connections to make sure that your music's never played. Like I showed DJ a day or two ago, the new. Well, I mean, it wasn't exactly the new video by Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion. It was a bunch of people laughing at how ridiculous it was. But their lyrics are. It's just pornography at this point.
Yeah, and in the lyrics, I think Cardi B says like, "Oh, tight like a nun," and that's where I had the biggest problem with that.
I did too.
Because it's not tight like a nun; it's toy like a toiger. You don't screw that up.
Exactly.
You don't screw that up. Oh, it's offensive.
Exactly. Yeah. DJ has
still mad about that.
He has one rule: is if you have the opportunity to quote Austin Powers, you do it. Yes, and anyone that doesn't, they're breaking the cardinal sin.
Yeah.
So
unacceptable.
Yeah. So the whole Laurel Canyon music scene was a special effect. And right now, Lookout Mountain is owned by Hollywood actor Jared Leto. A normal person did not get this. Now, Jared Leto isn't just a Hollywood actor. He is a literal cult leader.
It's surprising that home hasn't been burnt down, because if you look into these homes, I thought I was reading a murder mystery too. There's a lot of, he suicided himself, or there's another murder or suicide.
Like David Crosby's girlfriend, who was also that was the daughter of a military leader.
Yeah, there's been a few.
There's a lot of mysterious deaths too.
Oh yeah. Houses being burnt down. But yeah, I think that's interesting that Lookout Mountain survived.
Well, that's an important one.
Yeah. Goodness.
And they needed to
these
keep
these movie stars are involved, because you had the Young Turks, who are another big reason why these bands got off the ground, is because you had people like Jack Nicholson dancing.
Not to be confused with the Young Turks news network of
Turkey.
today.
Oh.
Yeah, yes. Not to be confused with Ben Mankiewicz and Cenk Uygur. Different Young Turks.
Is that a real thing?
Yeah, yes.
They were the original Young Turks.
Yes, the original.
And familiar people like, Jane Fonda. Oh, but yeah.
Hanoi Jane.
Oh, yes.
Now, I think right now what we will do, we will go to break. Now, what we're doing today, we're doing something different, because normally what we do, and we still do encourage this, we encourage artists, like if you want your song heard, because these big labels, they are designed in a specific way. And sure, there's Century Media and there's Nuclear Blast, or there are people that are still putting out metal, and they're giving them a little bit of promotion, but they're not going to take you to the top of the charts like they did in yesteryear. It's never going to happen again. And it's because the whole music industry is fake, and you are just a paycheck to them at best. So we want to make our own parallel society where, like, actual people that like music and not people that like being told what to like. So, send in your stuff. Like, we will play it. We're happy to do it. But today, because we're doing something different, I'm going to play a song that I really like. This is a song by a man named David Koresh. Maybe you've heard of him. But
put Waco on the map.
Yep, he sure did. Now, this is a song called Madman Living in Waco. Now, it's not about himself. It is about something else, but this is a very, very epic 80s sounding song. And I think it is appropriate, because this was another musician, if you would, but he was not an astroturfed musician. This was a guy who was the opposite, where he was railroaded and his name was dragged through the mud, And they told lies about him to protect the CIA, ATF, FBI, and the military-industrial complex. This guy was killed because he didn't want to be part of a society that he found to be reprehensible. Now, sure, he had his own problems in his own way, but all the stories told about him, almost all of them, were lies perpetuated by the same people that destroyed your country, and they used media, the same people. So this is Madman Living in Waco by David Koresh, and don't go away. We will be back with more Laurel Canyon.
All right, and we are back. Hope you enjoyed that one. And just to cap off the Jim Morrison, I figure it's really interesting. And the way I'm going to cap it off is talk about Frank Zappa's wife, Gail Zappa, who is known formally as Adelaide Sloatman. Gail hails from a long line of naval officers. Her father spent his life working on classified nuclear weapons research for the Navy. Gail had attended a naval kindergarten with someone familiar named Jim Morrison. It is claimed that as children, Gail once hit Jim over the head with a hammer. The very same Jim Morrison that later attended the same Alexandria, Virginia high school as two other future Laurel Canyon luminaries, John Phillips and Cass Elliott. But back to Zappa. He had an interesting manager named Herb Cohen, and he was a former U.S. Marine and spent a few years traveling the world before his arrival in Laurel Canyon. Those travels had taken him to the Congo in 1961. At the very time, Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba was being tortured and killed by our very own CIA. Zappa biographers say that Cohen wasn't in the Congo on some nefarious intelligence mission. He was there to supply arms to Lumumba in defiance of the CIA. So I thought that was kind of an interesting kind of segue there to cap that off. But yeah, Frank Zappa's wife knew Jim Morrison in kindergarten. So it's the same people.
Yep. and then they knew. And where is this Alexandria High School? Where is that located?
It's not in California.
Not in California, you say. Oh, but
it
somehow
might be close to DC.
Okay, but somehow all these people.
Yes,
oh, wait,
yes.
DC, you say? Huh?
Oh.
What is there anything interesting happened in DC?
I don't know if there's some intelligence going on.
But we probably shouldn't think too hard on that. But somehow, somehow all these people ended up in Los Angeles playing music together. Huh? Well,
going to
small world, as they say.
Yeah, a lot of military schools is where these people grew up too.
Yeah, strange.
Yeah. It's coincidental. It's a lot of serendipity.
yeah.
It's in this story.
Kind of. Wait, hold on. It's kind of herb coincidental.
Yes.
There's your pun for the episode.
There you go.
But back to Frank Zappa.
Zapper.
So I want to say this about Frank Zappa. Do you like any songs by The Doors? Just, be honest.
You know what? I actually re-listened to a lot of like these bands we were talking about, and The Doors actually were a little better than like most of the bands that I put on.
Yeah.
Which isn't saying much.
Sure, I agree. But yeah, the Doors have some pretty solid songs. Like the Roadhouse Blues, I think is a good song. I do like People Are Strange. They have a lot of songs that are just kind of weird, but for the most part, a lot of these songs by these bands are extremely cheesy and they're really like radio friendly. Like they're not like, when you think hippie music, you might think like bands like Fish, where they're just really annoying jams. But Frank Zappa's music is not that at all. It is I would call this type of music really inaccessible. Because you could take something like the Go-Go's is a good example. Vacation, all I ever wanted. Like super accessible, super cheesy music. Where like you can see someone kind of nodding their head and kind of bouncing their hips to it. And a lot of those 60s Laurel Canyon acts do fall into that, but Frank Zappa definitely does not. Frank Zappa, I would say, is almost ahead of his time as far as the music that he was playing, where I'm kind of shocked. But after doing all this research, not so much. But if I were like a complete oblivious buffoon with no understanding of what's going on at all, I would be very shocked that Frank Zappa was popular amongst all these musical acts.
Well, you could kind of say the same for all of them, but essentially it was a big part, due in part to the Vito and his Freakers. He had a group of 35 dancers, but like I said, we'll get into him later. But they would distract you from what was going on stage. So
you're talking about Vito and his Freakers, right?
Yeah, he had a dance crew of like 35 people.
I hate that. So this is like the precursor to Burning Man.
Yes. Yes.
Which I also don't like. If that may be a shock for many of you in the audience listening, but yes, I am not a fan of Burning Man and their culture. But I want to get back to Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
Because one thing that you did leave out about Frank Zappa, which, not that you weren't going to get into it, was who Frank Zappa's father was.
Yeah.
Now,
would he by chance have connections to the military-industrial complex, I wonder?
Now, I believe Frank Zappa's father worked for the Department of Defense.
Oh, that's funny.
Yes, he worked at the Edgewood Arsenal Chemical Warfare Facility of the Aberdeen Proving Ground, ran by the U.S. Army.
That seems like a good place to grow up.
Yeah, well, and apparently this had some kind of effect on Frank Zappa, which caused him to be frequently ill when he was a kid. Who knows?
I heard that.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I actually don't know how.
And
Frank
is that
Zappa,
is Edgewood in California?
No, Frank Zappa. I take a look here. It says he's from Baltimore. Let's see where Edgewood Arsenal is.
Believe that would.
Oh, that looks like that's in Maryland, which somehow not in California.
No, not even on the same coast. And
no, not even. And it's also not in near DC. I mean, technically it is near DC, but it's right. Still these people. They all somehow seem to find each other.
And it's also interesting that Edgewood, it's not only a longtime home of America's chemical warfare program, but it's also the facility that is cited as being deeply enmeshed in MK Ultra operations.
MK Ultra, I kind of want to skip ahead, but I'm not going to.
We'll get to that.
But everyone, keep MK Ultra. Keep that in your mind.
And I guess Frank Zappa as well.
Yeah, well, we'll stick with Frank Zappa for a bit before we migrate.
And then he lived the first 7 years of his life in that military housing on the grounds of Edgewood Arsenal near Baltimore, Florida. And then the family later moved to Lancaster, California, near Edwards Air Force Base. And that's where his father, Francis Zappa, continued to busy himself doing classified work for the military-industrial complex. Now your turn.
Well, the one thing about Frank Zappa, and this is not really a secret, and most people do kind of know this, is Frank Zappa was not a recreational drug user.
Right.
But one thing that he was staunchly in favor of was the decriminalization and deregulation of recreational drugs. So he didn't use it, but he didn't mind if you used it. So he was just a straight up political advocate, political activist, like another person who was kind of martyred and heralded as a voice of his generation, one Tupac Shakur. So Frank Zappa was a critic of mainstream education and organized religion. Now that has a different connotation than these days, where now I'm a pretty strident critic of mainstream education, but only because they no longer teach children critical thinking.
They don't teach education.
They don't. Yeah, exactly. They teach the opposite. They teach emotional reaction.
Oh, crap.
But when he was a critic of this, at the time, education was education. So there were all these people got together and they started chipping away at civilized society, turning it into the Planet of the Apes madhouse that we live in today. So he was an advocate for freedom. Zappa. Yes. Well, see, here's the thing. And he was an advocate for freedom of speech.
Francis.
And especially Francis, his father.
Well, yeah, not to jump too ahead, but he will join forces in some sense to our friend John Denver, who's actually involved in this too with the 1985 PMRC, where they both, talked in front of Congress, but not to get ahead.
Which also we have an episode on which we were in favor of the PMRC.
Oh,
that was episode 6.
Before this, we have to revisit.
Yeah, if you want.
Episode 6 down the drain.
Episode 6 down the drain, where we were advocates for the PMRC, and this is the thing with freedom of speech. because the freedom of speech that he's talking about is pretty much when you see these type of figures, when they say like, I'm in favor of freedom of speech. Now he's not in favor of say someone, saying right-wing speech. What he's in favor of is the new Cardi B song where she's not like a toiger. She's saying, other horrible things. That's the speech that he's in favor of. They're basically like peace and love is actually sedation and lust. Freedom of speech is freedom of vulgarity, because there used to be obscenity laws. Now, you want to know who was arrested for obscenity? Or do you know the comedian that was arrested multiple times for obscenity?
Was it George Carlin? But I was going to say
Babe Ruth another one.
Babe Ruth got kicked out of baseball games in like the 20s for swearing.
Well, that's where we've come from. But no, it was Lenny Bruce.
Okay.
And when Lenny Bruce died, he allegedly left his possessions to Frank Zappa.
Interesting.
Yes, very interesting. So this freedom of speech is literally the freedom of vulgarity. Well, so hold on before you go on. So these people, they're they're freedom of speech activists and these political activists. What they are really advocating for is the destruction of order. These are what you might call agents of chaos. We had a society. We no longer have a society. America is pretty much just a means for wealthy people to make money off of the little people. You are supposed to go to work an unfulfilling job, live in confined quarters, make a meager wage, get taxed the rest of it, and maybe when you're 70, you can pay off a house, and then
loans.
And because you had no children, because you were always working, you leave the house to the bank, and then they can sell it to new workers that are here to replace you.
Yeah, it's an endless cycle.
And it was because of people like him, because they're not advocates for liberating people. They're advocates for the removal of order. Because what they were critical of was an ordered society. Because it's not like in the 50s, people were constantly killing themselves because of depression. They certainly had money, so it's not like they needed more rights so they could make money and work. No, we had a society, and then these people came along, these children of military figures, and they told everyone, oh, by the way, your society sucks. We need to change it. And here, take these mind-altering drugs. If you don't believe me, take these mind-altering drugs, and then you'll see my point of view. And then people went along with the complete restructuring of America. Now go on. That was the end of my point.
Well, I was going to add to your vulgarity part, because
add to your vulgarity.
This is your vulgarity. No, was Zappa, his daughter Moon.
Diva?
I think what was her name? Moon Unit.
Moon Unit's isn't that a man?
It says Frank's daughter Moon.
Oh no, I guess Moon. I always thought Moon Unit was a woman or was a man because of the name Moon Unit. I guess that's a daughter because he has a daughter named Diva, but I guess Moon Unit.
So Moon recalls men with straggling beards, body odor, and bad posture who crouched naked near her playthings. Also, the Zappa children watched porn with their parents and were encouraged in their own sexuality as soon as they reached puberty. When they became teenagers, Gail insisted, that's Frank Zappa's wife, Gail insisted that they shower with their overnight guests in order to conserve water. Like, these are the people.
These are the people that are telling you that your society has a problem and needs to be changed.
Yes.
And,
yes, you're the
and the baby boomer generation went along with it. Now, but if you're a baby boomer listening, say, I didn't go along with it. It doesn't matter if you specifically didn't, because the people around you not only did. Once upon a time, people used to and I use that term a lot. Forgive me if I do, but we used to have like Dan Quayle. He proudly proclaimed, like, I from the baby boomer generation, we fought for blah blah blah, and he was out there criticizing Murphy Brown for being a single mother on television. And then now the term baby boomer has almost become a slur. Like, people are really, like, because they know that when younger people talk about baby boomers, they know that there's going to be a negative connotation associated with it. And it's because they did go along with a lot of this. Like, granted, you could say with some of these people, well, like, what do you do? Like, a lot of these bills, they weren't voted on by the public, and they was just passed, but the country just, it went under these people's noses because the people that could have done anything about it, that could have pushed back, that could have demanded that their representatives don't change every single thing about America, because America is essentially a third world country at this point. Like 70% live paycheck to paycheck. Suicide rate is extremely high. Crime rate is high. Like, all the wealth is among, it's among the top 1% have all the wealth. 1%. I mean, that is true. But these people, they were under a drug-filled haze, and then they were just engaged in this rock and roll, and they were part of these movements that made them feel important. Like, that was the real war that they fought.
Really doing something.
Like the quote unquote greatest generation, they fought World War II. So this really was the baby boomers war, was kind of the culture war. But what they were fighting against was order. And I will give them the benefit of the doubt. They didn't realize this was going to happen, because this is one of those classic cases of, well, hindsight is 2020. Sure. Because a lot of the stuff that they were told, like, this is what we're proposing and this is what's going to happen, was the opposite of what actually happened. And the people in power knew what was going to happen. And, like, you tell 18-year-olds may legally be adults, but they're basically still children mentally. Like, when we were 18, we were not smart.
Yeah.
Like, maybe we were smarter than other 18-year-olds, but still, like, 18-year-old me was not. Yeah, exactly. Real dumb. Right. So dumb.
The dumbest.
Yeah.
I don't even know how dumb I can be.
Yeah, we were basically Beavis and Butthead.
Ahead of our time, after the time.
Yeah. and this is all the result of these people. And it's crazy. So, like, Frank Zappa he's not doing drugs, but I would make the argument that pornography is a drug.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, he's encouraging his children to do this kind of drug. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and it stimulates the brain. I think it has a similar effect on the brain that heroin does.
Yeah. I think we've talked a little bit about that before, how the pornography industry, it's free, it should make you think about it, and that it gives you a dopamine release that is like the equivalent of like shooting heroin straight into your veins. So it should give you something to think about.
And this guy is watching it with his children.
Oh, go take shower with the guests.
Like, yeah.
and Zappa was living like a semi-communal life. Like, that was like a lot of people were there, because like I keep talking about these freakers, these people, but Vito Palekas and Carl Franzoni had these 35 dancers or whatever, and were living in the house Zappa lived in. Once they moved out, Zappa took over that community and became like the father of Laurel Canyon. So it's just very interesting. And even Gail Zappa once candidly admitted that even at her husband's shows, at Zappa's shows, the real attraction was not on the stage. It was the customers that came to see the freaks dance. And nobody ever talks about that, but that was the case.
And I believe that because like Frank
like
Zappa, yeah, like because here's the thing, like have you ever listened to like Inge Malmsteen or Steve Vai, like those guitar virtuosos?
Oh yeah.
Do you like it? Like, do you want to sit down and listen to it?
Not really. Like I respect it, I guess.
Exactly.
It's usually like not. Like it's just weird beats and timing. That doesn't go together.
It's an acquired taste.
Yeah, for
like
sure.
That, like you have to have a real deep appreciation for music to listen to it because it's not meant for the regular person to listen. Like let's go down to the like Buckethead is a good example.
Okay.
Where like great musicians they may be, but it's really inaccessible music. It's like the equivalent of like watching art films.
Okay.
Like you want to watch like Die Hard, and then instead you have like 35 minutes of like a lamp like dimming, where like you're looking at it and you're just like, I don't get it, and then someone else is like, wow, this is like so deep, and it's like the
camera angles are so good.
It's so emotional and it's so impactful when you're just like, it's a lamp. And that's what a lot of the Frank Zappa stuff is. And I believe that you have these weirdos, they just go like, I want to see the other weirdos. And they're not too big on Frank Zappa's music because they probably don't get it. And I know like people have said this about, have you ever seen The Wall, the Pink Floyd movie?
No, I haven't.
Like, they say, oh, you have to be on drugs to get it. Like, I don't think drugs make anything make sense. I think it makes you more complicit with things that you don't.
It neutralizes you, right?
Yeah, like you don't get it, but instead you're on drugs, so you don't care that you don't get it. So I don't think like Frank Zappa is like, if you're on drugs, you get his music. No, I think you just have to have an appreciation for musicianship because he plays music very well. Well, not anymore because he's dead.
He's dead, yeah. Actually dead.
Yeah, actually dead. Unlike Jim Morrison's father at the time. But yes, Jim Morrison's father is now dead. But people coming to see Frank Zappa's his weird freaks because they probably didn't get his music. But do go on more if you want to continue down the road of Vito.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So this guy was like a sculptor. I'll actually get back to Vito. I want to talk about Carl Franzoni, which was like his sidekick. So
yeah. More just Vito and the Freakers. So he's one of the Freakers.
Yeah, and the Freakers. So Carl Franzoni, his mother was a countess, and his father was a stone carver from Rutland, Vermont. The family was brought from Italy.
Now Vermont, is that in California? Is that Vermont? Is that part of LA?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay, okay. Just checking.
No, I think that's the state of the East Coast. But anyways, the family was brought from Italy, from the quarries in the northern part of Italy, to cut the stone for the monuments of the United States. So that makes his ancestors, it stands to be reason of considerable importance of the Masonic community.
Now, are these of this Masonic community? Now, are these ones that you pay for, or is this like a free type?
Let's see. It might deal with coming over here from Italy in the early 1800s to carve the Masonic monuments of Washington. So I don't know. I don't think it's like going to Costco and paying some money to get into.
Okay, so it's like a free Mason. Is that what you're getting at?
Oh yes. Giuseppe Franzoni, who came over with his brother Carlo, had especially good family connections in Italy. He being a nephew of Cardinal Franzoni and son of the president of the Academy of Fine Arts in Carrara. So
this is not some regular Joe who is looking for his place in life and said, like, this isn't like Wayne Campbell, like, I'm going to put on a concert. This is someone who's connected to very powerful and influential people in his homeland.
Right. So getting back to the freaks, call them freaks, the underground, the counterculture, flower children, or hippies. They are all loose labels for the youth culture of the 60s. But these are the guys, the people who essentially were the first hippies, and that's where they came from. But the craziest thing.
Now, what was Carl Franzoni's nickname?
Captain
F word.
Captain F word. You did some research. I know
a little bit.
So this is interesting to me. This was, I don't know if this is the most interesting thing I came up with. But I'm like,
not the Dos Equis man, but still something.
Exactly. So Franzoni turned up now and then on that early version of America's Got Talent known as The Gong Show.
Yes, The Gong Show.
He was one of the worm dancers. Anyways, The Gong Show was the brainchild of Chuck Barris, who famously claimed that during the days when he appeared to be working as a mild-mannered game show producer, he was actually on the payroll of the CIA. And that while he was ostensibly serving as a chaperone to the couples who had won trips on the dating game, what he was really doing was carrying out assassinations.
So we have this guy from this game show is actually a CIA hitman.
Admittedly, too.
Yeah, and we'll get into a little more CIA stuff.
Yeah,
as far as like direct connections and not just.
But I wonder why you haven't heard of the Freakers.
Yeah, yes. If these are the founders of, like, they coined the term hippie. Like, imagine you're like a fan of death metal, and you've never heard of either Death or Possessed.
Exactly.
Because and I always say those because there is the debate, like, did Death coin the term death metal because that's their name, or did Possessed coin the term death metal because that's the song on their first album? It doesn't matter. But imagine, like, this is where the term, like, these are the men that coined the term hippie, and from what it sounds like, they acted as the actual, like, we are the counterculture. This is our thing that we are doing.
We're making this famous.
Yeah, this is going to be this is going to be the behavior that others are going to follow. And we're associated with CIA hitmen. And we come from a long line. And also, I just want to comment on this. They come from a long line of basically aristocracy. So, and a lot of these people that buy into this stuff, like, they really think that these are like working class heroes. Like self-made. Like, even going back to Karl Marx. Karl Marx, essentially the founder of communism, was a wealthy aristocrat.
Oh,
and
really?
He's fighting for the little guy. He's fighting for the working class.
He's fighting
all these movements. They're meant to be like, I'm relating to the working class, the everyman. Like, I have my pulse, or my finger on the pulse of society. I know what people are into, and they're always backed by media, and they're always from money. Always. And this is why I'm so adamant. Like, DJ, you said you'll make $15 million. This is why I say you won't. Because the people that do research. The people that do, they're always from, like, the people that quote unquote make it, that they're self-made, not one of them has been self-made. Now, I will add a little, like, clauses, like, I don't think that Metallica are like a CIA operation. Again, I don't think Depeche Mode is a CIA operation. I think there were some genuine grassroots musical acts that evolved from something that probably was a CIA operation. And it really resonated with the youth and the music industry, which is ran by the CIA, as per Operation Mockingbird, which we don't need to get into, but you can look it up on your own. The CIA admitted to running the media. And they used these to exploit the youth, and they use them to use them as fodder for their own means, because metal evolved into grunge, and that just told the youth, like, just be a nihilistic heroin addict. And that's where you get a lot of like really despondent youth people, and then culture dies right after that, and now people have nothing. They're left with nothing. You don't have music. The only music you have is Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion saying lyrical pornography.
Yeah, our news is that, hey, Meg Thee Stallion's on Instagram now. Like, that's page one news.
Yep, and this is what the counterculture fought for, and it started with Vito and the Freakers. It really did. This is the origin of the destruction of American culture. Was Vito and the Freakers. But go on, back to Vito.
Well, so a member of the Palakis family, that's Vito's family, they were asked if Vito was a pedophile, and they responded, probably, but I believe you have to go deeper into the libido and drives of so many rock stars and famous people that who had an unhealthy relationship with sex and drugs. Any biography of the rockers of that time, and probably any time, just skirts around the reality that their greatest secret and shame includes the sex they had and have with very young girls and boys. Roman Polanski just got caught. I love hearing from people who tell me Vito saved their soul or protected them from danger when they were young and at risk. I am sure some became survivors and others fell deeper into the abyss. That's Vito's family talking about him.
Yep. That's the founder of the hippie movement, child molester.
Yeah, exactly. And then
and not like just a child molester, but he said, yeah, probably, but all of these people are.
Yeah, it's not just him. He's trying to defend him a little bit.
and you know what? I'll throw this out. Frank Zappa probably was just judging by the behavior he had with Moon Unit. So exactly. He probably was.
Really
Jim Morrison probably was. These if this guy's saying like all these people are, just assume all these Laurel Canyon people were. And that's another thing with free love is like it's not like sex was illegal or something you had to pay for. It's not like the movie Starship Troopers where you have to be in the military if you want to have babies. No, like you can have it. Yeah. So this is a thing. Vito and a guy named Sue and Carl, they began going to clubs with a growing group of self-styled freaks who lived semi-communal life and engaged in sex orgies and freeform dancing whenever they could.
Yep. Wonderful people.
Yeah. So part of that free sex, it's probably not just with children, but other people's spouses. Because I believe adultery was illegal.
Swingers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is
having sex with kids. I mean,
yeah. It's all this is. It's the abolition of order.
Mm-hmm.
That's what these people are all about. And then these hippies, they're into it because they're just. This is. You ever see Pinocchio?
Not the new one.
Not the new one. No, the original one. Like they're all going to Donkey Island or Pleasure Island, I guess, and they're turning into donkeys.
Yeah. Turning into donkeys, yeah.
Yeah, that's a perfect metaphor for the baby boomer generation. They all went to Pleasure Island, and then now, here's the thing. Everybody kind of has their own criticisms of every generation that's not their own, even their own. But right now, almost every generation that's not the baby boomer generation hates the baby boomer generation. When the baby boomers die off, like there will be massive rejoicing.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. I'm just saying that's what it is. And it's a lot of it is because of this. Like there is deep resentment for baby boomers. Like just hang around on like image boards, go on Reddit and just see what people say about baby boomers. Like, Zoomers have a lot of problems. Gen Xers and millennials have a lot of problems, but the boomers literally took a perfect country and they threw it all away because all they had to do was maintain order. But they fell for this con.
Yeah.
They fell for the con of just, do drugs, have sex, listen to rock and roll, and whatever. You're still going to have a lot of money. And when you retire, you have whatever. And they're like, sounds good. Like they had everything. And all they needed to do was say, no, let's just carry on the traditions of our parents. And they could have taught their kids the same lessons. Because if you say like other generations are bad, it's like, well, who raised them? Like if baby boomers have any like criticisms of like Zoomers or Gen Xers or millennials, well, you could have decided to raise the Gen Xers a certain way. And a lot of the baby boomers that I'm really talking about, the real problems are the hippie baby boomers, the ones that were part of it. Because there were plenty of baby boomers that saw this and said, like, get a haircut, hippie. Like there were plenty that did not like this. But most of them bought into this. Far more bought into this than didn't. And that's where that's how we ended up where we are today. Because this is the immediate fallout. That essentially what happened was a bunch of rich kids were the children of military people. And their parents said, you can have the whole world. This is what you have to do. And they said, okay. And their target audience were baby boomer children that had no idea that this was a CIA operation. This was an attack on them. And it succeeded marvelously. And I think this was kind of the beta test for what they would repeat in the future. And I stand by that metal in the 80s was its own kind of op, because what it did was it normalized satanic imagery. And while it didn't turn the country satanic, but it normalized an aversion to Christianity. And it turned America from a Christian state basically into a secular state. And then the grunge movement kind of normalized despondency and nihilism. And then after that, there's nothing left. There's no more culture. Like the rock that comes out today, it doesn't appeal on a massive level. Like grunge was a movement, metal was a movement, punk was a movement, and Laurel Canyon psychedelic rock was a movement. And they don't need to do anything anymore. Like it's almost just kind of like going through the motions that there's somewhat rock bands, but rock is not hard anymore. And they don't have anything that appeals to young people. All it is it's TikTok and rappers. That's it. There's no more movements. It's everybody is atomized, and they just kind of they just kind of go with the flow essentially, and then they gravitate from trend to trend. And there's no one has the thing that defines themselves anymore. And that was by design. And this was how the CIA took culture away from you. And this is how they used the culture to steal your country away. And they made sure that the same people would always stay in power. Do you have more on Vito and the Freakers? You want to keep going with them?
They are. I mean, so like these bands that were opening up in Laurel Canyon, getting started, that obviously like Zappa, like you didn't care to actually see what he was doing on stage because you would go to see the Freakers. But then there are also these people, like I mentioned earlier, the Young Turks, who were a little bit of influential.
And again, not the YouTube channel, not Cenk Uygur, not Ben Mankiewicz, not Anna Kasparian. Although the video, the Young Turks 2016 meltdown, really funny. I do recommend.
Is it? Yeah, I'm unfamiliar, but
it's really funny. But go on, the Young Turks.
So as with the Freaks, the presence on the Strip was obviously heavily promoted by the media. Locals and tourists alike knew, where to go to see the Freaks. But as an added bonus, you could possibly rub shoulders with these Young Turks like Peter Fonda, Jack Nicholson, Bruce Dern, Dennis Hopper, and Warren Beatty, along with their female counterparts. Some might be familiar here, such as Jane Fonda, Nancy Sinatra, and Sharon Tate, which we will eventually get into. But yeah, it's interesting when you get into these people because some of them, like Bruce Dern, has connections to the Skull and Bone Society,
which also is connected to George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush.
Yeah. Gosh, there's. Another is the son of a naval intelligence officer who was once married to a Rothschild descendant, and third was the slightly deranged son of an OSS officer. So Jane Fonda obviously came from the same family as her brother Peter.
And Henry, her father.
Yeah. But Jack Nicholson was the strangest one of his backstory. Are you familiar with any of his backstory at all?
I know he was in a movie called Little Shop of Horrors.
Well, Jack Nicholson was born at some indeterminate location to an underage, unwed showgirl.
I did not know that.
The identity of his father remains a mystery. To avoid social stigma, his grandparents claimed him as his son. So that's how he became John Joseph Nicholson Jr. He grew up believing his mother, June Frances Nicholson, to be his older sister. And apparently he learned that his mom wasn't his sister in 1974 when he was 37 years old. Could you imagine that? Your sister is your mom? Let's see.
Did you ever watch that? Oh, no, you didn't. But never mind. Go ahead.
So the weirdest thing is that until 1954, Jack Nicholson technically doesn't officially exist because he doesn't have a birth certificate. So what they did in 1954 is they gave him a certificate of a delayed report of birth that was filed on May 24th, 1954. And it says that his grandparents are his biological parents. So it appears there is no way to determine who Jack Nicholson is. Like, this stuff is so weird, dude.
And okay,
so weird.
And you want to know something about Jack Nicholson? I believe he's the most nominated actor for the Academy Awards in history, and he has won 3 Academy Awards. And I do remember a time when like Jack Nicholson was everywhere. Like Jack Nicholson was kind of like the king of Hollywood. Like, okay, do you remember the movie Wolf?
Which movie?
Wolf. It's just called Wolf.
Wolf? No.
So Jack Nicholson played a werewolf. I never saw the movie, but I remember seeing trailers for it all the time, and it was the same year that A Few Good Men came out. And just like everywhere you turned, you could not get away from, you can't handle the truth.
Oh, yeah.
So
still can't get away from it.
I don't know. I think Jack Nicholson has mostly been swept under the rug. I haven't seen anything from him in, I can't tell you how long.
Apparently he's like 87 years old, but we really don't know.
Well, for all we know, he's 67 years old.
So I thought it was interesting too with these young Turks and Turkettes that Henry Fonda scored his first acting gig through Dorothy Dodo Brando, the director of a local theater and the mother of Jack Nicholson's future neighbor, Marlon Brando. Small world, huh? Good, small.
Do you want to skip around to the Marlon Brando connection? Do you want to do it?
I think I'm asking for it.
Do you know where I'm going with this?
A little bit. There's a lot with Brando.
How is it? What do you think I'm going to do to tie it together? You go ahead and take the lead if you think where I'm going to go with Marlon Brando.
Let me go for it. Marlon Brando is in a direct line of descent from French Huguenot or Huguenot. I don't know how you say that. Colonists Louis Dubois and Catherine Blanchin. They arrived in New York from Mannheim, Germany, circa 1660, and promptly founded New Rochelle. I don't know what that is.
New Rochelle?
Yeah, descendants of Dubois include former U.S. Senator Leverett Saltonstall, former Massachusetts Governor and Council on Foreign Relations member William Weld, former California First Lady Maria Shriver, and quite likely Presidents Jimmy Carter and Zachary Taylor. So is that where you're going? The genealogy of Marlon Brando, sort of?
No, I'm not. I got something. Maybe this might blow your mind.
Oh.
So Courtney Love is adamant that Marlon Brando is her grandfather.
Why would she think that?
Apparently, that's who she believes was the father of her mother. There is. She's basically says no other man could do that, and she just, as far as she knows, Marlon Brando is actually her grandfather. Now, Courtney Love is the goddaughter of Phil Lesh, the bass player for the Grateful Dead.
Mm.
And Courtney Love has her own musical connections with, obviously married to Kurt Cobain. She was in a relationship with Billy Corgan. She sang for the band Faith No More. Not like she wasn't on albums. They bring her on stage and she sang for him one night. She was connected to Marilyn Manson and Trent Reznor. So she is what we may call a homie hopper, but I think she's almost more of a kingmaker.
Oh,
so she is possibly a descendant of Marlon Brando. She's the goddaughter of Phil Lesh. Her father was, I believe, the manager of the Grateful Dead. Hank Harrison, he went to college with Phil Lesh and roomed with him in the early 60s and apparently managed the Grateful Dead when they were just called the Warlocks. So it's all the same people. Courtney Love was part of the 90s version of of the Laurel Canyons. It went from LA to Seattle. And apparently, so Courtney Love is descendant of possibly Zachary Taylor. It's all the same people.
Crazy.
Yeah. So, we'll get to we can get to the Grateful Dead when we get there. But did you wanted to keep going with Jack Nicholson and Marlon Brando? You want to? Do you have much more on that?
I mean, there's a little interesting thing too with these people with like Henry Fonda is a direct descendant of jealous du Fonda and Hester Jans Fonda, Dutch colonists who arrived in New York circa 1650. And so it's so weird, dude. Like, so the Fondas had sailed out of Friesland, Netherlands, on a ship dubbed the Valkenier, which happened to be co-owned by a very wealthy Dutchman by the name of Jan Baptist van Rensselaer. Essentially, the Rensselaer is the bloodline that would one day produce a guy by the name of David Van Cortlandt Crosby. It's like, so it appears that Peter Fonda kind of owed Crosby this Triumph motorcycle that he gave him back in the 60s because David's ancestors were so nice that they gave Peter's ancestors a lift over to the New World. Like, it's the same people, man. And they're all entertainers.
So I want to do one thing here about Crosby's, Stills, Nash, and Young.
Okay.
And then I think this will be the part. I think this is going to be the bookmark that we're going to just put our pin in, and we will continue this next week.
Well, do you know who created their like logo?
No, go ahead. Tell me. I'd love to know.
Phil Hartman.
Seriously?
It's the same people, and they all end up dead.
Oh my gosh!
Oh, so I don't mean to ruin that one, but I'm just like totally ruined the Crosby, Stills, and Nash. But
media aristocracy. So you have these two things that work in conjunction. You have these people in power, and their children tell you how you should feel about the people in power. Mm-hmm. That's it. It's all a shell game. But Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, this was a thing that stood out to me. And like I said, put a pin in an MK Ultra. So MK Ultra, one of the code names for it was...
Oh, yeah. Bluebird, right?
Bluebird, which is a song by Crosby, Stills, and Nash.
Uh-huh. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So
it was Bluebird was the code name before MK Ultra, right? Did you just say that?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a cryptonym for the CIA mind control program that ran from 51 to 53. Now, MK Ultra has long been kind of a
declassified, right?
Well, yes, but I mean, before then, it was just kind of like a kooky, you believe in MK Ultra? Oh yeah, I bet you think that the world's ran by lizard people. Well, it's like, it's not ran by lizard people, but if it were, it'd be ran by the same lizard people.
Ask David Crosby.
Exactly. He's some kind of walrus person, as far as I can tell.
Walrus.
But
Tusk.
Exactly. But it was declassified, and basically what it wasn't like some guy holding like a coin and it's like, you are getting sleepy, and when I count back from 10, you will kill someone for me. No, what MK Ultra essentially is they subject people to abuse and psychedelic drugs. And they use that to warp people's brains. So essentially they beat them and they give them drugs to condition them, and then they get them, like, when you hear this phrase, that's when you're going to do whatever you do. And they basically came out and said, yes, this is real. This was a thing that happened. But the way they released it, well, if they released it, why don't people know more about blah, blah, blah? Well, you didn't know about Vito and the Freakers. I didn't know about Vito and the Freakers.
Yeah.
I knew about Vito and the Freakers. Yeah, but did you know about MK Ultra? Oh, there's so much information out there that the people in power know you're not going to look for, because you're going to be looking at your TikTok. You're going to be watching nurses dancing. You're going to be looking at the newest tweet from Elon Musk to be outraged at. You're going to be at this, that, or whatever. You're going to be at each other's throats over stupid things. And you're not going to realize that they've long since pulled the rug out from underneath you. They can tell you right now. They can tell you the truth about everything, and you won't care because you've been distracted by everything. That's the purpose of a lot of this media stuff, is it's all a distraction.
It confuses you.
The music was a distraction to make you forget that the point was never the music. The point was the music was the platform that they gave to elevate these rock stars into a status where they had the biggest megaphone, and they just told a generation what to think. And this generation was perfectly brainwashed into allowing people in power to steal everything, not from them, but from their children and their children's children. Mm-hmm. And that's the point of all of this, is they don't need to do anything because they can get you to do it for them, because they create the personalities that you worship. And as you're worshiping those personalities, you are doing their bidding by pretending that your thoughts are your own independent thoughts, when the reality is Jim Morrison and Frank Zappa and John Phillips, they told you what to think. And we will get to more of this.
Yes. John.
Yeah, Papa John. Not to be confused with the Pizza Man, a different Papa John.
Yes.
But so I want to do something differently for this episode. Normally we'll have DJ sign us off and take us home, but we're not going to do that this time because, this is
not going home.
Yeah, this is just part one in a multi-part series. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a pin in all of this, and we're going to come back because there is a lot more to talk about. There is a lot more. Like we touch on David Crosby. There is a lot more to David Crosby.
Goodness.
There's more of the Mamas and the Papas. There's the Grateful Dead. There's plenty of things that we haven't gotten to. The Monkees, Harry Nilsson. There is plenty. Yes, there is plenty more for us to get to. And this is something. All the episodes we did before that was child's play.
Yes.
Like this is real
stuff.
Yes. Yeah, this is the World Series. This is the finals. This is the Masters.
This is it, folks.
It's all come to this. And share this with your friends, because the music industry has been a weapon your whole life. Like even going back to Elvis shaking his hips in front of girls. It's all been orchestrated. And it's all been a test. Like, sure, there's been people out there that picked up a guitar that wanted to, play some songs and, maybe make a living off of it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm talking the mainstream music industry. I'm talking about stuff that's on the radio, stuff that's on the TV. Now it's stuff that's on the TikTok and the Snapchat. If you see it, that it's beamed in front of you, not you found it, because there's stuff that you'll find and you're like, oh, this is good. Why has no one heard about it? Because it's not a weapon. It's not a weapon used to destroy you. All these weapons used against you, that's what's pushed. If you've heard of it and you don't like it, they want you to know about it. Who's they? Well, we gave you plenty of names. We gave you so many names. And they're all friends with each other. And don't think for a second, like these politicians that are like, this person and this person were yelling at each other. I bet they're related. They're probably and they're best friends.
Their families have been intermarrying for 1,000 years.
Yeah,
years.
Yeah, I believe like California, with the exception of Arnold Schwarzenegger, has been ran by like 4 families, like in its entire existence.
Probably.
I mean something like that. I don't remember, but something like that.
There were California politicians that were involved or living in Laurel Canyon at this time.
Yeah,
which we can get into as well.
We will.
Like it's everybody. It's the same. We will. Yeah. We'll get into it.
Yeah. So
there's plenty more. Like it's a jigsaw to really jigsaw puzzle to really put this together. Like you do have to do your own research.
Well, and we didn't make this up. Like the information is out there. Like we'll put a link to the book Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon by David McGowan. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And you again, and also, I'll show my record because my music is more wholesome and it's not a weapon, made to get you to sacrifice your children. In fact, it's the opposite. You can still available, Endure by Ancestors Call. That's me. But so normally DJ would sign us off, but he's not going to because we're not done. So we will see you next week. And when DJ signs us off, that's when you know that we're done. So until then, see you next time.